Hello everyone and welcome to Aero Innovations. I'm Aero and I'll be your host this evening. If you're new to the channel, I'm a longtime low stakes pro who currently lives and plays in Las Vegas. For my returning viewers and longtime fans, I know I haven't been posting as regular lately and I wanted to apologize for that. For a while there, I was up to almost 2 full videos every week. If you're not familiar with the behind the scenes requirements to make these videos, they're a lot of work. In the first few months since I started vlogging, I didn't allow myself any personal time whatsoever. It was play poker, cook for the family, clean the house, record videos, rinse, repeat. We did go on family trips and short vacations, but I never had any personal Aero time to play video games or anything of that nature. I did work out, but that was about it. And for a few months, that was okay. In October, I tried to move up in stakes, but that ended horrifically. I am extremely good at what I do, which is 1-3 and 2-5 no limit hold'em, and you would think that would translate to higher stakes. But you need time for adjustment. Every stake you move up requires a completely different strategy to dominate. So when I lost 9 grand in October strictly from 5-10 sessions, it was a huge ego hit. Considering I have over an 80% win rate this year in the 2-5 game, I just couldn't stomach the loss. Long story short, I needed a break. I'll get more into that later in the video. But for now, let's catch you up on my latest session in December. This session takes place on Sunday night. It's technically Monday morning since I don't start until just past 2 in the morning. We're playing 2-5 no limit hold'em at the Win Encore in Las Vegas, where I buy in for $1,500, which is 300 big blinds. The first hand I get dealt, we get seated to a 7-handed table where I pick up pocket 8s. I open raise to 15 in the cutoff, everyone folds, and I just pick up the blinds. The very next hand, the low jack opens to 15. I look down at king queen offsuit in the hijack. A small percentage of the time I can elect to 3-bet with this hand to isolate in position, but I prefer to just flat call and keep in weaker hands, especially when I'm new to the table and I don't know how the other players play yet. So here, I just call. The button calls as well, and so does the small blind. So we go 4 ways to a flop that's ace, jack, 5, rainbow. The action checks around. For educational purposes, if someone had bet here, I'd be willing to call up to full pot. Yes, I only have a gut shot draw, but the pot is relatively small, and we're all very deep enough to warrant a call since the board is completely rainbow. I'm in position, and my 1 to 11 chance of hitting my draw will still give me the absolute nuts, regardless of which 10 comes on the turn. So the turn comes, and it's a beauty. It's a freaking 10 of hearts.
Oh my!
Giving us the nuts and putting a potential flush draw on board. Big blind leads for a strong bet of 40 with over a $2,000 stack. He's a good player I've clashed with a few times previously. I'm not sure if he's a pro or just an above average rec. The low jack, who's the original raiser, thinks about it for a little while before putting in the call. Time to juice up the pot. Yes, I have the nuts, and yes, I have position, but a very common mistake low stakes players make, especially in the 1-2 and 1-3 stakes, is slow playing. Pots don't build themselves. If you want to stack someone for their entire net worth and send them home penniless, you have to put in the work. So there's a potential flush draw out there, and even if the board were rainbow, I would still raise in this spot here. So I bump the action up to 155. The button quickly folds, but the big blind calls. The low jack gets out of the way. So we go heads up to a river, which thankfully is an insignificant 3 of spades. We still have the nuts. Big blind checks. I want to go for max value here. I have to think about how much to go for. If the big blind had been the original raiser, he'd be uncapped. His hand range could contain all the sets, or even a hand like king queen for a chop. But since he only just smooth called the $15 open and then checked the flop, the strongest hand he could realistically have here is pocket 5s for flop bottom set. That's the absolute peak. More commonly, he can have a hand like 10 jack or ace 10 for 2 pairs. At the bottom end of his range, he could have a weak ace that's only good for a hero call. A missed flush can't call any size bet here even if we breathed into the pot, so we can discredit those types of hands and just target the top of his range. I decide to not get too greedy and shoot out a bet of 325. My opponent tanks for over a minute. I think he most likely does have 2 pairs of some sort. He eventually does put in the call, and we show him the bad news. Up over $500 only a few minutes into the session. Barely 10 minutes later, we're only 4-handed here for this one since a few of the players are standing up. The cutoff opens to 15 with a stack of about 900. The button folds, but small blind calls, so I defend the big blind with queen 7 of clubs. The flop comes, and it's a pretty good one. We're talking about 7, 9, king with 1 diamond and 2 clubs. We flop bottom pair with a flush draw. We're exactly 50-50 with any one pair type of holding that isn't holding a club or a queen. So for instance, a hand like ace-king or even pocket aces. Small blind checks. I want to potentially take down this pot without a fight. I can get hands like pocket 8s or 10s to fold some of the time with a bet, so I lead with a decently strong bet of 25. The cutoff calls and the small blind folds. The turn is the deuce of hearts. We have some but not a whole lot of showdown value at this point. Our odds of winning has been reduced to roughly 30% against a hand that's currently beating us, assuming he isn't holding king-queen. Our opponent only just called the flop, so he can't be too strong. I think he most likely has a hand like king-jack or king-10. I decide to check here with evil intentions of check raising. If he did have a hand here like king-jack or king-10, there's a very good possibility he will fold to a check raise, and then we can take down this pot without needing to actually improve. Unfortunately, our opponent doesn't fall for the bait and checks back. Thankfully, the river brings in a 3 of clubs. We improve to the second nuts. At this point, we can't go ballistic. We would telegraph the strength of our hand. Plus, if we throw out an overbet here, smaller flushes will only just smooth call. I want to target all of his one pair type holdings, meanwhile giving enough room for a smaller flush to raise us. So I lead with a half pot bet of 45. If our opponent did lead with a bet on the turn and then called our check raise, I probably would shove here on this river considering how big the pot would have gotten. So here our opponent calls and we table our hand for a small win. The very next hand, we're still four-handed. The dealer forgets to move the button. No one notices. I'm trying to take notes for the vlog about the last hand, so unfortunately I didn't notice either, and posted my big blind yet again. Here, the button opens to 15 with over a 2k stack. He's the same opponent from the first hand that we beat with the nut straight. The small blind calls, so again I decide to defend my big blind with 6-7 offsuit. The flop comes 6-3-7 with 2 spades and 1 diamond. We flop top 2 pairs on a very coordinated board. Small blind checks. I can't expect the button to stab on a board this low, so I lead with a bet of 25. We want to target hands like pocket 8s, 9s, or even a hand like ace 4 or ace 5. Notice I use the same exact sizing as I did in the last hand. We're near the top of our range here with top 2 pairs, whereas I led in the last hand with a draw. I would also lead here with the same sizing with 4-5 for the flop nut straight, or any of the sets including top set. Remember, I rarely ever slow play. You need to build your own pots. So here, the button calls and the small blind folds. The turn is an ace of hearts. I decide to get deceptive and start with a check. Our opponent shouldn't ever have a naked ace here unless he did have a hand like ace 4 or ace 5, but he might try to represent the ace due to his position. He might even have a hand like the ace high flush draw. Surely enough, our opponent decides to bite and throws out a smaller than expected bet of 50. If our opponent does indeed have the nut flush draw, he just gained massive outs against our 2 pairs. Out of position, we're not going to gain too much value from hands like 8s or 9s on this type of board anymore, so I go for a pretty hefty check raise to 200. Our hand is pretty vulnerable. A board pairing 3, another ace, a spade, a 4, or a 5 would be really disheartening on the river. If we were in position, we would not need to be nearly as aggressive. Our opponent thinks about this for a while, but he does eventually make the call. The river is a 10 of diamonds. Okay, time to put on our thinking caps. Right now, we are no longer at or even close to the top of our range. We lose to aces up, all sets, and 8-9 just rivered the nuts. Every bet you make, think about what types of hands you're targeting when you decide on a bet size. Go too big, and only hands that beat you will be left in your opponent's calling range. Only use those types of bets when you're actually nutted. Here, I want to target a hand like the ace high flush draw, ace 4, ace 5, or a random big ace that just decided to float the flop. The pot is just shy of 500. So I decide on another stagnant bet of 200. When our opponent quickly counts out raising chips and then slides in a bet of 600, our 2 pairs quickly shrivels up. If our opponent had some kind of misdraw, he wouldn't be using this 10 as a scare card. If he had a hand like ace 10, even if it were spades or even a flop set, I think he would just call. I was the big blind after all, so there's too high of a chance that I actually flopped a straight with 4-5, whether suited or not. Keep in mind that all of this analysis is for the stakes that I play in, and against a strong opponent. Don't utilize this if you're playing 1-2, 1-3, or even 2-5 with a 100 big blind structure. My opponent is repping only one hand here. I think he rivered the nuts with 8-9, most likely of the spade variety too. That hand makes the most sense considering the pre-flop, flop, and turn action. Never get married to your hand. I'm not beating a whole lot here that my opponent is betting for value. In fact, I'm only beating a naked bluff with what I'm holding and what he's representing. I'm not sure I would call here even with a set, so I make the disciplined fold. and only after folding my hand do I realize that the button never got moved, and I should never have been dealt this hand in the first place. Sad times. About 15 minutes later, we're back to six-handed here. Under the gun opens to 20 with a stack of about 1250. He's been raising more than anyone else on the table in the short time that I've been here. I'm holding Jack Queen of Diamonds, which is a great hand to isolate in position, so I put in a 3-bet to 60 in the middle position. Everyone else folds, but my opponent has no inclination of doing so. In fact, he puts in a 4-bet to 160. If he only had 7 or 800 to start, I would just fold here. But since he started with over 1200, I think a call here is justifiable, so that's what I do. We go heads up in position to flop of Queen, 7, 8, with 2 hearts and 1 spade. We flop top pair with no redraw, but we're feeling pretty good when our opponent starts with a check. If I had a hand here like 7, 8 suited, a set of 7s, or a set of 8s, I would definitely bet this flop. If our opponent check raises us with a hand like kings or aces, he'd be in a world of hurt, and I would love to invite that action. With just top pair and a mediocre kicker, I'm only realistically beating a hand like ace-king. I think jacks would be an unwise choice for our opponent to 4-bet out of position, but if he did do that, I don't want to discourage him from betting future streets. Sometimes you have to protect your check-back range. Just because I check back this flop doesn't mean I necessarily have a bad hand. Yes, this board is wetter than grandma, but grandma isn't very wet to begin with, and suits aren't nearly as big of a factor in a heads-up situation, especially in a 4-bet pot. So I think the most profitable play here is to check the action back, so that's what I do. The turn brings in a 9 of hearts, completing the front door flush. 10-jack also makes the nuts straight, but a hand like that should be completely out of the question for our opponent's range for a 4-bet raise out of position. When our opponent checks for a second time, I think we have a clear winner. No more free cards. I put out a bet of 175. Our opponent thinks for a minute. A bet now, after a check on the flop, probably looks pretty weak to him. He knows that, but unfortunately for him, I know that he knows that. So when he puts in a check raise to 575, leaving himself only 525 behind, I ask the dealer to confirm the bet amount, and then instantly snap shove, taking less than 5 seconds to come to my decision. Come on, bro. You can't 4-bet pre-flop, check the flop, check the turn, and then now suddenly expect me to believe you have a monstrous hand. If he has ace-king of hearts here, I'm just gonna pay him off. But that type of hand is more likely to continue with a c-bet on the flop, to potentially take it down without needing to hit. Sure, it is possible for him to still have an overpair here, but anything's possible. Every day I step out of my house, I take the risk that I'm not going to get smashed by a meteorite. Even against a hand like kings or aces, I still have a good 9 clean outs, assuming he doesn't also have a heart to go along with it. We can hit a 10 for a straight, a queen for trips, or a jack for 2 pairs. Our opponent tanks, and tanks. At this point, I think he's just trying to save face. He's already committed over 60% of his stack. Jacks with a heart would call. Ace-king with a heart would call. Any overpair with a heart would snap call. Any overpair without a heart would probably still call considering how much he's already invested. But I doubt his hand is that strong. In all honesty, I think he has a hand like ace-king with no hearts. Eventually, he does make the fold. I'm happy to win such a sizable pot with such a mediocre hand considering the action. Yes, I was drawing dead to a flush, and yes, I was drawing really poorly to any hand that had me beat. But in situations like that, you just have to go with your read. That's why I often say that poker is 70% psychology and 30% math. Hey everyone, Happy New Year's! Woo! You made it! You survived! You lived another year! You also made it to the intermission, so congratulations. I originally recorded this like 3 weeks ago. I was hoping to get it out before we went on vacation, but that didn't happen. Anyways, I want to give you a little sneak peek into my real life. Let's get into scary stuff, real stuff, possibly boring stuff. But we went on vacation quite a bit this past December. That's what happens when you meet a girl online and your family's from Northern California, but her family's from Southern California. Anyways, if you're wondering about the mask, if you're new to the channel, my wife insists for a little bit of anonymity. She doesn't want our personal life leaking into my online persona, so that's why I wear a mask. I'm also a masked vigilante, and I commit crimes on the weekends, but don't tell anybody. I'm featured on the Absolute Nuts channel quite a lot, so along with everyone else on the channel, so if you want to watch me play live poker, you can come on to their YouTube channel. It's the Absolute Nuts. They play live stream every Friday and Saturday night from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. usually. Anyways, I want to talk about something real serious, and something that might be affecting a lot of the players and the viewers out there. I know it's something that affects a lot of us pros, and it's not fun, and it affects me. I'm not immune as well. And we're talking. I mean, it's hard for me to bring up, but I'm talking about a gambling addiction. And you might have heard it from some really big names out there, Stu Unger, Scotty Nguyen, even Mike Matusow. There's another gentleman that he's known for like the biggest run in Vegas history, bringing like a $10,000 bankroll all the way up to 40 million freaking dollars, only to drop it all at the baccarat tables. And that's kind of what has been affecting and plaguing me recently. I mean, I do suffer from a pretty big gambling addiction. Um, it runs in my family. I don't want to, like pass off the blame onto that, but it's like an alcoholic addiction. Oftentimes, it's genetic predisposition. In October, I lost $9,000 playing 510, and I was trying to go up in stakes. And I mean, for me, 9,000 in a month, that's not that bad. I can make that up. If you watch the channel, I have over an 85%, roughly 80% win percentage when I play 2-5. I rarely ever lose, and when I do, it's pretty small. I win, and I only play like 15-ish hours a week, and I'm sitting here making five figures. So making up 9,000, that takes me about a month. Playing 2-5, and while I'm sitting there, having fun at the casino, talking with people, it's not like I'm out doing construction, working, sweating, hard labor in the hot Vegas summer. So for me, it's the money comes kind of easy. But the problem with that is, I'm sure probably the same reason. A lot of other pros have the same problem. The big time winners that play tournaments and take down millions. When the money comes easy, you don't have as big of an appreciation for it. And maybe it's also, for me, I don't know about other people, I can't speak for other people, but for me, I have a huge ego problem. If I lose, a considerable amount, like let's say $9,000, I want it back immediately. And it's a big impatience problem. And, if I lose playing 2-5, it's like $1,500. Even a really, really, really bad night, which is rare, I might lose 2,000. And that's not a big deal. It doesn't bother me. But when I lose like 9,000 playing 510, it hurts. It's not fun working. It is my job, even though it's playing poker. So for a lot of people, it's like a recreation. For me, it's a job. When I work for a full month and then I come down with negative money after the month, after all is said and done, it hurts my ego. So I try to get back at the baccarat tables. It's a big reason of why I haven't been producing as many vlogs of late. Oh, I needed a break. I haven't gambled in several years. The last time was stocks. I didn't know what I was doing, had no idea what I was doing. I lost a lot of money betting on AMC and GameStop to go to the moon, they said. The only thing that went to the moon was my money, and it never came back down. So that's been a couple of, like 2.5 years, I think. I didn't even know I was gambling at the time. I thought I was investing. I had no idea what I was doing. But lately, I've been playing baccarat, and I can lose in a single night what it takes me to make in a month. And what I make in a month is what a lot of people make in like 3 months. So it's bad, and it put me in a really dark place. And if you're out there and you're suffering from the same problem, I just want you to know that you're not alone. But for me, what brings me back to the light is the fact that I have a family that depends upon me, and I can never go completely broke because I need money to make money. And they are my light. I mean, I come home to my kids, my wife, and they bring me joy and happiness. And if you suffer from this problem, you need to find your light, something that outside of the casino that brings you light, brings you happiness, and you can dive into that. Because any kind of addiction is debilitating, and it's really bad stuff. I'm glad I don't have a drug addiction, so my family doesn't have to worry about me waking up to an OD one morning, and I'm glad I don't have an alcoholic problem, although it does run to my wife's side of the family. But any addiction is bad. There's Like, too much of a, there's no, even too much of a good thing is bad. Love becomes obsession. And when it comes to addiction, it takes over your freaking life. So that's why I had to take a break. I haven't been vlogging as much. I, not necessarily great, but I went from one addiction to another. I stepped away from my gambling problem and played video games. And you're thinking, oh man, Aero, what the freak, dude? You're 45 years old and you're still playing video games. But I mean, it's better to be playing Baldur's Gate 3 than gambling Baccarat and getting my wife texting me constantly, where are you? What are you doing? So yeah, I just wanted you to know that, if you do have a gambling problem, try to find a different reservoir to channel your focus into, something that brings you joy, something you can step back away from and, go back to normal life. And, because if I continue gambling, I'm just going to gamble until my bottom dollar. I'm not going to have anything left. I'll be destitute. But I just have to remind myself that any losses I incur, I can make up for over time. Money is just something you can get back over time, but there's things you can't get back, like your relationship with your children, with your spouse, your significant other, your loved ones. If, I gamble to the point that we're destitute, my wife will leave me, I can lose access to my kids. It can be a bad thing. Okay, so you probably wonder how much did I actually lose? I have the freaking casino host texting me again. Hey, come back. Get a room on us. You need food? You want to watch a show? And well, yeah, they're gonna try to give you a couple $100 back here and there. They're giving to comp you a room. That's because I personally have lost tens of thousands of dollars these last couple months. It's freaking terrible. But the casinos, look how they're huge. They're extravagant. They weren't built for you to make money. You can make money one night. You make money a week, a month. The guy that made $40 million. But eventually, if you come back, the odds are stacked against you. You can win 10 coin flips in a row. That's possible. It's not out of the realm of feasibility or reality. But the law of large numbers, you're not going to win 100 flips in a row. You're not going to win every day the rest of your life. You can't make a career out of flips, especially when you're not actually flipping 50-50. When you're playing against a casino, the house has an edge. Every game, unless you're card counting with blackjack, is pitted against you. The math, you're just playing with bad math. And as a professional poker player, I should know the math needs to always be on my side. I'm really big on math and statistics. So when I gamble, it's just compulsion. There's nothing logical about it. I know that I can't win long term, but I can't. When I start, I can't. There's no stop button. I will bet and have bet my bottom dollar so many times in my life, and it's probably one of the reasons I'm still playing 2-5 and not bigger games. Because whenever I get a couple steps up, I just the gambling addiction just knocks me down so hard. I'm trying. I acknowledge that I have a problem, and that's a first step. If you want to get out of an addiction, you have to admit you have a problem. And my parents had a problem. It's I'm not using that as a crutch or an excuse, but I'm just letting you know that I do have a gambling problem, and I'm trying to work through it. Yeah. So now that you know a little bit more about me, let's get back to the poker and crush other people's hopes and dreams. For this next hand, a table has broken and fed into ours, so we finally have a full 9-handed table. It's 3:19 in the morning, and about 40 minutes since the last hand we played. There's a live 10. I open to 40 in the cutoff with ace-king offsuit. The button, a more conservative player, calls with a $1,700 stack. Big blind also comes along, who's also on the conservative side, with a short stack of only 400. The flop comes, and it's 6, queen, 10, rainbow. Big blind checks. We didn't actually flop anything. We do have a gut shot and 2 overs, and a queen high flop is good for our range as the original raiser. So I start with a slightly over half pot bet of 75. Considering both of our opponents are on the tighter, more conservative side, an amount of this size should get them both to fold if they're not holding at least a queen. Unfortunately, they both call. The turn is a 5 of spades, putting 2 spades on board. When the big blind checks, the jig is up. It would be suicidal of me to continue here. One, if not both of them, has at least a queen or better. The big blind also has a short stack, so he has almost 0 fold equity. I decide to make the prudent choice and check. The button asks how much the big blind has. He hears that he has around 300 remaining and shoots out a bet of 225. His question and his bet size acknowledges that his intent is to put the big blind all in. He knows that the big blind has a short stack, so this bet is never a bluff. He's basically saying that he doesn't care what the big blind is holding card-wise and wants to take the rest of his money. The big blind agrees and shoves in for the rest of his stack. Super duper easy fold for me. The button shows a set of sixes, which coming from a conservative player isn't too surprising. But the big blind shocks me when he reveals his hand and turns over a set of tens. They were both slow playing and trying to trap in more Aero doll hairs. Bugger that. I might have been born at night, but it wasn't last night. Let's see a nice handsome jack on the turn and see who takes whose doll hairs. Anyway, the river is an inconsequential 5 of diamonds, and pocket 10 scoops this juicy pot. See, this is one of the reasons I always top off instead of playing short. Give me those pocket 10s, and I would have scooped the button for his entire $1,700 stack, and not just a measly $400. Set over set is a very rare occurrence. When you get the better end of the stick, you should definitely try to maximize your earnings. Winning only $400 in a 2-5 game where the max buy-in is $1,500 seems like a really big shame. A few minutes later, under the gun opens to 20. The +1 calls with a stack of about $1,800. I'm staring down at our least favorite premium starting hand. Oh yes, we're talking about pocket kings. The Cowboys, a couple of dirty old rednecks. I don't mess around with a hand like this, especially considering how deep we are, so I pump the action up to 100. Everyone quickly folds, including the under the gun original raiser, but the +1 calls. Then she checks dark. Okay, just so you guys know, an action like that is almost always, exclusively, a pocket pair. When your hand is worth calling $20, but is still worth calling 100, and then you check dark, pocket pair 19 out of 20 times. So the flop comes, and it's not one we're super excited to see. It's ace 4-8, with 2 clubs and a heart. This is not the type of flop we can hope to get 3 streets of value from, even if we're ahead. Assuming our opponent didn't already flop a set, she's going to put us on that ace. So the value we're going to try to get out of her has to be extremely thin. We're talking like wafer thin, like how much I pay our editor Josh to work on these videos. So I check the action back. The turn is another 8, which we're very happy to see. Our opponent checks again. Okay, so we know our opponent is unlikely to be holding that ace. An 8 is also out of the question, unless she has quads. How much is any pocket pair likely to pay off here? I say I want to keep things friendly, and throw out a tiny bet of 30. So she makes the call. The river is another board pairing 4. So now pocket 4s is also out of the question, unless she has quad 4s. So when our opponent checks for a third time, unless we're about to face a check raise here with actual quads, she can't beat a single card on this board here. So again, we have to target her hand for really, really small value. I throw out yet another small stagnant bet of 30. She makes the call again, and we show her the dirty dingoes we just beat her with. They're good, and she says she had pocket 9s. See what I just did there? I extracted an extra $60 out of an opponent on a board where neither of us could beat a single card. This is a skill that you need to pick up if you want to maximize your profits. Don't be afraid of scare cards that don't make any sense, and learn to target specific hands with certain price points that make it extremely hard to fold. For the last hand of the night, the low jack opens to 15. The hijack calls. I call in the cutoff with pocket 3s. The button, small blind, and big blind all come along as well. We go 6 ways to a flop, which is ideal when you're holding a small pocket pair, but I don't even know what I have to say about this flop. It's 3-3-7 with 2 diamonds and 1 heart. Hello, Quadzilla! Wait, didn't we just share tequila with Quadzilla while holding pocket 3s only just last month? It gets even better when after small blind checks, big blind leads for a considerable bet of 55 into the $90 pot. Unfortunately, he can't have a whole lot considering I'm pretty much holding all the cards. A 7 most likely. Pocket 8s or 9s maybe once in a blue moon. The low jack and hijack both fold. Of course, I make the rational play and just call. For educational purposes, if the flop had been 7-7-3 instead of 3-3-7, with bottom boat, I would raise here. You should almost never slow play anyways, but especially never with bottom boat. Your hand's just too vulnerable. It's not the same as slow playing with pocket 10s on a 7-7-10 flop. So here I'm hoping someone else tags along with a flush or possibly combo draw. But unfortunately, the button and small blind both fold. We go heads up in position to a turn, which brings in a 10 of clubs. Unfortunately, big blind checks. We already know he's most likely holding a 7. So here I want to pretend to our opponent that I have no idea what I'm doing. I've never played with him before. One look at my 3K stack should indicate otherwise, however. If you ever see a professional make this tiny bet I'm about to make, you should definitely fold. I dangle a tiny bet of 50 into the now $200 pot, which is smaller than my opponent's flop bet. This entices him to do exactly what I was hoping for, in the form of a freaking check raise.
I'm gonna come. Oh.
Here I am holding quads, and my opponent just check raised me after leading on the flop into 5 other players. Unfortunately, he chose a really small sizing. He only check raised the action to 125. I'm sitting over here mentally drooling, hoping he has pocket 7s or even pocket 10s. Of course, I make the rational choice and only just smooth call. Notice how I didn't check back the turn even though I had quads, and got my opponent to dramatically increase the size of the pot. The river comes, and I'm really hoping for another 7, but unfortunately, it's a 6 of hearts. It's even more disheartening when my opponent checks yet again. The pot is now $450, and I'm sitting here with the absolute nuts. If I only had a boat with a hand like pocket 7s or pocket 10s, I would smash burger the heck out of this river with at least a pot-sized bet, if not a little bit bigger, trying to make it seem like I missed some kind of draw, or maybe extract value out of a naked 3. Unfortunately, we've narrowed our opponent's hand to most likely a 7, which can't even beat a 10. He has a bluff catcher, and that's about it. This is kind of like the pocket king's hand. We can only go for really small value here. I decide to not get too greedy, especially after my tiny bet on the turn. So I throw out another super small bet of 100. If our opponent missed the flush draw, there's a decent chance he might mistake this for weakness and use this opportunity to throw out yet another check raise. If he only has a 7, he's not calling too big of a bet anyways. Probably maybe 200 at most. Unfortunately, no check raise happens. Our opponent pretty quickly makes the call for our tiny bet, and I introduce him to my business partner and associate, Quadzilla. I play for a little while longer before the table breaks, and I decide to call it an early night. In for 1500 and out for 2742, for a sizable profit of $1,242 after only 3 hours and 21 minutes of playtime. The sun is starting to come up, so I want to get home to see my family before my daughter has to go to school. I hope you guys don't mind that I deviated from my normal, no-nonsense vlogs for this episode. I thought you deserved an explanation for why I haven't been posting as often lately. So I took a big break to travel throughout California for the holidays, but I hope to get back to at least once a week vlogs this new year. I tried to meet up with North Cali Poker and Doug McCuster while in the area, but Sacramento is apparently absolutely atrocious for vlogging. Thunder Valley Casino doesn't allow vlogging of any sort. Doug and I dropped by to ask, but we got shooed away. Capital Casino only allows Doug specifically to vlog, and I think Stones only allows North Cali to vlog, so that didn't work out so well. I tried to have a little fun competition with Doug McCuster playing the 1-3 at Capital, but I wasn't allowed to film any of it, so I couldn't get any footage. In any case, if you like what you saw today, I implore you to smash the thumbs up like button, and consider subscribing to my channel to learn more tips and tricks on how to crush low stakes, no limit hold'em. If you ever come to Vegas, you can find me on the weekends at my usual haunt at the Wynn Encore, or playing on stream with the team from the Absolute Nuts crew at Resorts World on Friday and Saturday nights. I want to take a moment to thank each and every one of our Patreon subscribers. Your support is greatly appreciated. If you're looking for a more affordable alternative to my poker coaching, feel free to hop onto my Patreon. For a low monthly fee, you can check out several of my coaching videos there. Until next time, I hope to see you in the next video.